Okay, so now we'll go into the buttons. I'm going to delete this line out of row at periodic and make it fresh. Now we're going to talk about buttons, who's got the buttons? What do y'all know about buttons? They don't have to. They can give commands. Say again? They're inputs, okay? What can you tell me about the inputs it gives you? What can a button tell you? How many things can a button tell you? Well, it can tell you how to act, but what is the information the button is giving you about itself? On and off, right? Is it on? Is it off? And we have other words we use besides those. Another word is enabled, disabled, pressed, or released. We'll add enabled, disabled. These words, the pressed and released specifically, are the ones you'll probably see most often when reading about buttons. But another set of words you'll see a lot are true and false. That is because a button is a supplier of a very special kind of data. And the data it supplies is called a Boolean. A Boolean is any value that can be true or false, pressed or not pressed, on or off, enabled or disabled. Only two states are possible. Now, how we read that data, there's a lot of options there. So let's look at the code again. Let's focus on, actually, there's one more thing I do want to talk about, are these joystick buttons. For FRC programming, buttons are identified by an ID number. So every button on every joystick has an ID number. And that number starts with 1. It's unfortunate because it should start with 0, but it starts with 1 for historical reasons. Button 1 is the A button. So whenever we talk about button 1, we're talking about A. Now, if you want to know what the other ones are, you can look in Driver Station and figure it out, but A, B, 1, 2, X, Y, 3, 4. That's a good place to start. That's going to be important. So the buttons have an ID number and they start with 1. And that's going to be true for every joystick. If I have 3 of this joystick plugged into my computer, the A button on every single one of them is ID 1, but they belong to a different joystick. So I would have 3 joystick variables, and then I could get to the A button for each one of them. So making sure we got that. Okay, so I'm going to get a value. I'm going to store it in a variable. What kind of value can a button tell me? A Boolean. So the shape of a box is probably the word Boolean. I have to give the box a name. I'm going to give it the name pressed. And we'll say pressed gets. Where is this value coming from? What is telling me this value? My joystick. My joystick. How do I get the joystick to do something or tell me something? Okay, use parentheses. I'm going to use a method though, right? But how do I use methods on an object? The dot. Dot. And now here's something great. When you press the dot, you're going to get this little pop-up. And this pop-up is every method on the joystick that you have access to. There's a lot of them. Joysticks have a lot of information. We're going to use the method called getRawButton. So this line of code, Boolean pressed equals myjoystick.getRawButton, is going to say what is the value of the raw button. Which button? Which one? Yeah, I can't use 0 because there's not a button 0. I need to use 1 because I want the A button. Now I'm going to add one more line up here. I'm just going to add a note to myself. This is the A button. And then I'm going to add a line after that. I'm going to do system.out.println pressed. So there's 2 lines of code here. There's a comment that isn't a line of code. There's a line of code here that'll pull out the value of the button, and then it's going to print the value of the button, whether it's pressed or not pressed. How often is this going to run?
Whenever the button is pressed?
Until the button is released.
Where is this code written?
Very on it says right.
It runs every 20 milliseconds as long as the robot is running. So this is going to run whether or not the button is pressed. Get raw button just tells me, is the button pressed or is the button not pressed? So I'm going to sim this code. And the nice thing about Robot Periodic is you don't have to put the robot in any special state. You can just start the program and it will start giving you values. I'm going to simulate. I'm going to hold this up so you can see what's happening as this is running. So what's it doing?
Mine said build failed.
Okay, well, we'll see in a minute why your build failed.
Compiled Java failed.
So what's happening on mine, though?
It's spewing out false.
Why is it spewing out false?
Because you're not pressing the button.
I'm not pressing the button.
But if you press it,
If I press it,
it's still false.
it's still spewing out falses. So why might that be? Let's look at my simulation real quick. Oh, because the keyboard is my joystick. Let me drop in the actual joystick. It's still saying false. Still saying false.
Is it on?
Is it on? Disconnected. Let's switch over to disabled. There we go. And so as every time I press it, it switches over to true. And it's spewing it out. Why is it spewing it out?
Because it's constantly running.
About every 20 milliseconds. Now, is that a guaranteed 20 milliseconds? No, but that's approximately what it's going to be. So I can see that. It's going to be false whenever it's not pressed, which is released. It's going to be true whenever it is pressed or pressed. Yep, so this is fine and dandy, but we don't like this. This is too much information too fast. So what we're going to do is we're not going to use this system.out.println anymore. We're going to delete that line. We're going to use a tool called Smart Dashboard as a part of Shuffleboard. So here's how we put data into Smart Dashboard. We're going to start typing Smart Dashboard until we see it. Why are we doing it this way instead of just typing it all out? What do I get if I select it versus if I just type it out?
The full thing.
Say it again.
The full thing.
The full thing. What do you mean by the full thing?
All the lines of code related.
Which specifically the import. So Smart Dashboard, I should get that import up there. Dot, because I want it to do something. And the thing I want it to do is I want it to put Boolean. So switching over, let's talk about putting data on the screen. So when you want to put data on the screen, you're going to use something called a dictionary. And a dictionary lets you look up data and change data. And in order to put data into a dictionary, you need two things. You need a key and you need a value. The value is, what is it? Is it true? Is it false? Is it 5? Is it some text? What is the thing you are trying to look at? The key is a name. So just like we had variables have names and values that you put in the variable, in this case, the dictionary has a key and a value. So we're going to switch back over. Smart Dashboard uses a dictionary. So there's 2 values that we need. The first is a key, and that's going to be a set of quotes, and we're just going to say what it is, A pressed. The second thing is the value. Pressed is the thing that we want to care about, and then we've got it. So it's doing the same job as the console.println, but instead of giving us text, it's actually going to make it look a lot nicer. Now for this to work right, we're going to have Driver Station open, so make sure you've got Driver Station open. And go to the settings wheel, and for dashboard type, make sure you've got Shuffleboard. So Shuffleboard, which some of you have already seen, is a dashboard. It is a way to display data. So what we're going to do is we're going to minimize all that, and we're going to run the simulation again, but this time we want to make sure we're using Driver Station. So when it gives us the pop-up, we're going to make sure we pick the Driver Station option. So use real Driver Station, okay. And so I'm going to minimize the sim window because I don't care about it. I'm going to look in Driver Station, make sure my controller is in position 0 because that's how we wrote it in the code. And then we're going to look at Shuffleboard. And in Shuffleboard, you should now see this red square. And you can make it bigger. And if you press the A button, it'll go green. And if you let go of the A button, it'll go back to red. All right, now I would argue this is probably more useful feedback than that text. Now here's something else to be aware of. If you right-click on this, you can actually change what it looks like. If you want it to look like the word true and false, you can do that. If you want it to look like a toggle button, you can do that. If you want it to look like a toggle switch, you can do that. Personally, I like the Boolean box. It's most visual. Yeah. Any questions about that?